with other intersections.
Along the way.
Man, an enlightened.
What, they popped it onto their face and they put it up.
His own free will. Such unthinkable violence.
Didn't really address that much.
So one day,
and August comes to mind.
but we can hope.
Khuấy nắng vào nồi cơm đang.
Same semester I failed my college.
Have lost.
With his dingy vocabulary.
Beautiful when reflected in it.
Specialized classes.
He'd been involved with various older women.
But this.
Stay, and he'd give my grandma.
Not broken up.
Who grew in numbers by the day.
It's been 2 months.
Taste this time, she swears.
Broken or sound.
As the lawlessness of the...
I was 4 years old.
My grandson, who adores and lived it until I was 12 years old.
Our training course the previous winter.
Sketching and making.
Laura Zam is an award-winning writer, speaker, certified sexuality educator, and sexual solutions coach. Her work has been featured in many media outlets, including NBC, The Washington Post, InStyle, and others. She's the author of The Pleasure Plan, a best-selling memoir about healing painful sex, currently being adapted into a television series. Often mixing pathos and hilarity in refreshing ways, Laura's writing has been featured in the New York Times, Saloon, HuffPost, and other publications.
Hi, I'm Laura Zam, and I'm performing with 1001 Artivists, and I'm going to talk about how we can rejuvenate ourselves and how we can heal from past oppression and abuses, and how we can fortify ourselves on the front line, fighting for justice and fighting for empowerment and all of those amazing things. So I talk about something called pleasure literacy. And pleasure literacy is the ABCs of feeling good, or learning the ABCs of feeling good, despite whatever is going on in our lives. So it's a pleasure positive way, really, of looking at resilience. But it really drills down into pleasure itself. And pleasure, as I define it, is body happiness. It's good feelings physically. So people talk a lot about joy and gratitude, right? That's so popular. And people talk about, more and more people are talking about wonder, enchantment, all of these other kinds of juicy experiences that we might have that contrast with the grind, right? That contrast with the grind, and also maybe really difficult circumstances that we have in our lives. But I think that often when we're talking about that remedy, it's just talking about the emotional part that we can cultivate. And to me, there's a little bit of maybe prudishness in not looking at something that might be more obvious and even direct. And that is to look at the way that we can use our sensory apparatus and the things that delight us, delight our senses, to give us a sense of rejuvenation, a sense of pleasure, an experience of pleasure. So what happens when we've got the body that is feeling good? Well, all of these happiness hormones are stimulated. There are endorphins. There is dopamine. There's oxytocin, which is our bonding chemical. And then there's also dopamine. I think I left that one out. So all of these neurotransmitters, they actually stimulate each other. So when you serotonin, that's the one I left out. So you've got these neurotransmitters, and they're all stimulating each other, and you can have this really lift of mood, but also a calm, like oxytocin particularly is known as the rest and digest hormone. And it literally takes us out of fight or flight. It literally takes us out of fight or flight when we stimulate this hormone. So I think we miss the boat on this when we're just saying, let's do our gratitude list, which I am so in favor of. But I think we could also turn to that morning coffee or tea. We can turn to a pleasure experience that we already permit ourselves to have. Most people have a lot of baggage when it comes to pleasure, right? A lot of shame, a lot of fear. People think it's only about sex. That word is only talking about sexual pleasure, and that's not true. It's not true. But even despite that, I think most people allow themselves certain pleasures without a lot of baggage, without all the guilt. Maybe 4 brownies, people, right, or even the craving for one is going to bring up a lot of stuff for people. But that coffee or tea usually, especially in the morning, is something that is an unequivocal pleasure or joy. So I start there with people. I start there when I teach this stuff. Let's start with that pleasure you already have, and let's see if we can just expand the moment a little bit. Like put down your phone, maybe incorporate something, another delight of the senses, like looking out the window or lighting a candle or putting on some music, and just relax into that, right, that experience, savor that experience just a little bit more. I think if we can do it just a little bit more, it becomes a portal. I think it becomes a portal, and it transforms the moment, and it transports us out of that fight or flight, the stress, the even the exhaustion of doing this fight on the front lines. I'm really committed to pleasure. I'm a professional sexologist, I'm a sexuality educator, and I came into this work because I didn't know how to heal from my own childhood sexual abuse, which reared its head in an exacerbated way when I got married for the first time at 46. And I didn't know what the problem was, if it was this trauma recovery from 40 years ago that I'd never healed, if I just didn't know about sexual pleasure because my development as a sexual being had been so messed up as a victim of molestation. I didn't know if I didn't know about relationships or sex in relationships because I'd never had a successful long-term relationship. So I went on a journey healing myself, an elaborate journey, and I wrote about it in a one-person play, and then I got a book deal, and I wrote about it in a book called The Pleasure Plan, and I became, at that point, certified as a sexuality educator to work with especially women who also struggle with sex and help them not feel broken and help them feel like there's hope for them. I started doing that work. I still do that work, but then I saw that there was all this other potential for pleasure, and that I could take what I'd learned as a sexologist, teaching people how to have pleasure, and usually it is that kind of ABCs. Even if you're learning how to orgasm, you have to start, or that's my technique, to start people from, well, what do you like, just in terms of the world? How do you savor life? Do you savor life? Most people don't. Most people don't. So I was starting them from there anyway, but then I saw all this other potential because I saw that there were all these other areas where people actually could have a more expansive and delicious experience of being alive if they just acknowledge that, oh, the coffee, I can just use that coffee in the morning to teach myself something as a practice. When I started expanding my work, I started really thinking a lot about this word pleasure, and because it's so scary outside the sexual realm, and it's even scary in the sexual realm, but I'm really committed to it. I'm really committed to talking about pleasure using that P word. And the reason is because my mother was a Holocaust survivor. She survived 2 concentration camps, 2 Nazi ghettos, and a death march that started in Poland and it ended hundreds of miles away in Germany. And as part of this experience, my mother was tortured for 6 years. A lot of that torture was starvation, but in the concentration camps particularly, my mother was tortured in a variety of ways, but one way that really, really informs my work is that in the morning they would do a count. All of the prisoners, thousands of people, would need to stand or would be forced to stand outside in all temperatures, and they would have to hold their arms up above their head for hours until every single person was counted. And if you dropped your arms, you'd be shot. So I ask myself every day, what is the opposite of that? What is the opposite of physical torture? Because I don't believe the opposite is emotional. I mean, that's part of it, but primarily to me, the opposite is feeling good physically. Feeling good physically. I think that this is really important work for us as people who might be working in an activist capacity, fighting for our own justice and justice of other people. It's not uncommon for people who are oppressed in any way to endure some kind of abuse, and that abuse is often physical. It can be emotional as well, but even the emotions have a strong physical component. Just as I said, those happiness hormones, right, are stimulated when we are mistreated. There is a strong physical component. Anyway, my remedy is your morning coffee or tea. Just do what you're doing. Allow yourself to enjoy it. Maybe though, put down the phone. Don't look at the news, not for these couple of minutes. And see if you can just expand the moment and see what that's like to just be present with yourself and know that maybe that's enough. Maybe you don't need to meditate 20, 40 minutes a day, or you can. Meditation's great. But sometimes we can, if we expand that coffee, it could be a really, really fantastic way to get us in touch with these beautiful ways of healing ourselves and restoring ourselves. Thank you.
We've gathered such an incredible community of strong, fierce, creative women whose voices and art can continue to change the world for the better. There's so much work to do. First, let's finish this job. Make sure your vote counts. Help us sustain and grow this beloved community by donating money, volunteering time, or by telling your friends about us. With your help, we'll be able to provide a wider platform for artists, produce higher quality videos, publicize our activism to bring voices to a wider audience, pay our interns, and hire an executive director. Please consider supporting us.
Women write the story of our world every day. Listen and your heart may open up. If ever you feel frightened of our world that's washed away, a mother is a mother, come to us. Women, 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 so the fact